So there were, I don't know, at least a million different reasons why I married Mandy. Like a ton. Hundreds, if not thousands. Billions, possibly. But if I had to boil it down to one reason in particular why I married her over everyone else, it's because she said yes. But if I had to pick a second reason as to why Mandy was definitely the right one for me, it is because my wife has this beautiful and amazing ability to tell me exactly what's going on. Mandy doesn't play a lot of those games of, the silent treatment. She doesn't, am I doing something? Okay, I'm going to keep going. She doesn't tell me, she doesn't try to come up with different reasons as to why things are going on. She doesn't, do a lot of guesswork with me. If I ask my wife how her day went, she's going to tell me, sometimes in some amazing detail. If I ask my wife what she wants me to do, she'll tell me, sometimes in amazing detail. And just this week, I actually asked my wife what she wants. She's got a birthday coming up. And I asked my wife, what does she want for her birthday? And without a moment's hesitation, without any sort of thought behind it, she just fired off, roller skates. And she's 100% serious. I love that about my wife. I love the fact that I don't have to play a whole lot of guesswork with her because I'm a fairly simple guy. I mean, let's be honest. Guys, we're all fairly simple, are we not? Maybe a little too simple in some cases. But we're we're simple creatures. I don't do well at guesswork. I don't do well at different things. If she had a problem with me and didn't tell me, I wouldn't know anything about it. I would assume that everything was fine. She's just being a little quiet tonight. If there was all sorts of other things, I wouldn't realize what it is that she would need from me if she didn't tell me what it was. I certainly never in a million years would have ever thought to buy roller skates for a woman who's about to be I don't need to look, I know. But that's the thing, is that I love that about her. I love the fact that I live by the simple philosophy of if you have something to tell me, tell me. Otherwise, I'm going to assume everything's good. It's real complicated. But the reason why I think I appreciate this directness of my wife, why I find it so attractive, is because I, through a period of my life, dated girls who weren't very quick to express how they felt about certain things, and rather than just tell me what was going on, would play a lot of games. I don't like games. And in fact, because of that, I'm a big believer that teenagers should not be allowed to date, period, until you're old enough to not do that kind of junk. But I had one particular girl who was apparently upset at me. I don't know what I said or did to cause her to be upset, but she decided to express her disapproval by giving me the silent treatment. And after a few days of us not talking to each other, one day she just called me because apparently my reaction of giving her her space was not the appropriate reaction. And she said, "Didn't you notice I've not been talking to you for a while?" To which I responded, "I just assumed you were busy. You didn't have time to talk to me." This apparently was not the right response either. Because this particular young woman, she hung up the phone on me. And then when I didn't call back immediately, she called me again a couple hours later and says, "Why didn't you call me back?" I assumed you needed to cool off and that you'd call me when you were calm. We didn't date much longer. There was also this other girl who I was sort of dating, which meant that we were dating, but we were teenagers and being overly complicated and dramatic about it because teenagers are dumb and should not be allowed to date. I believe that. Anyway, but we were kind of talking on the phone about something or other, about the dumb stuff that teenagers in a relationship talk about, and she fired off the wonderful line, "Hey, guess what I'm thinking?" What a great way to start an argument. Now, again, I'm not good at guessing things. I don't like being surprised by things. So I've just responded in the most dramatic, most romantic boldness that I possibly could and said, "I don't know." And she responded by saying, "No, seriously, I want you to guess what I'm thinking." Now, proposed in that particular moment that rather than make me play a game that I didn't want to play in the first place, and rather than lead us to another argument, how about instead you just tell me what it is that you're thinking? Right? I mean, that's so difficult for us to wrap our minds around, to just be direct. And instead, this young woman chose to just continue to make me try to guess. This went on for 20 minutes. Until I finally fired off like, hey, I got to get off here because I've got homework or I've got chores or I just don't want to talk anymore. Probably more that one. And then I left. To this day, I still have no idea what that young woman was thinking. Maybe it was tacos. Maybe she was thinking about tacos. Maybe I should call her and find out. Anyway, the fact of the matter is that I've always found it's better in our interpersonal relationships with people to be direct. Now, I mean, that doesn't mean be so direct that you're blunt and to the point that you can be hurtful, but be direct with what's going on in your mind. I do not understand what it is about us as human beings that makes us feel like we've got to play these little games with one another. I'm willing to bet that each one of you in here have experienced at least one person in your life who you wish would have been a little more direct with you. Oftentimes, they leave out information that they think that you already know. And if you don't know that information, it can cause problems. If you're at work and somebody doesn't give you the information that you need, it can cause some issues. It can maybe lead to somebody getting fired. I don't know what happened here. I'm all of a sudden very all over the place. Anyway, sometimes depending on where you work, if you don't have that information, it can be dangerous. Maybe if you're in a marriage and you're not direct with each other, if you can't openly communicate with the person that you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with, that's going to create some issues. Nearly always, I'm under the belief that being direct with people and giving them the information that they need is important. It's frustrating. It's even angering when somebody does not give you important information that they think you already know or that you need in order to help them. So I imagine that no one who was in his court was overly happy when Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, asked for their help in understanding that dream, and then he wouldn't tell them that dream. We find it in Daniel chapter 2, which is our text for the day. So please turn there, if you would, please, in your Bibles, or get there on your Bible app. Last week we introduced a little bit of Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Babylon, a ruthless dictator who had a keen military mind and led the nation of Babylon into becoming a global superpower. One of those nations that was overseeing all these other nations around them. They were an amazing kingdom. They did a lot of great and amazing things. So turn there in Daniel chapter 2. But here's the thing. You and I would think that being in the service to the king would have to be your dream job, right? I mean, if you can work under the king, if you have the ear of the most powerful man in the nation, if not one of the most powerful men in the entire planet, that's got to be a nice job, right? But as we're going to find in our text in Daniel chapter 2, that this dream job sometimes was an absolute nightmare, especially when your boss was in one of those moods. But then again, if we're going to be honest and give Nebuchadnezzar a little bit of credit here, if you'd had the kind of nights that Nebuchadnezzar had in verse 1, you'd be in one of those moods as well. Daniel chapter 2, verse 1 reads, "In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams that troubled him, and sleep deserted him." Nebuchadnezzar is having a reoccurring dream. I don't know if you've ever experienced reoccurring dreams in your own life, where you just night after night seem to be dreaming the exact same thing over and over and over again, and the dream keeps playing out much the same way. It's a little unnerving at times if that happens to you. But for Nebuchadnezzar, having this one reoccurring dream, this was causing all kinds of problems. He didn't understand what this dream was supposed to be about. But the thing that troubled him most was that he felt like this dream was trying to tell him something. But there was something being lost in the translation. He couldn't figure out what was going on, and it bothered him so much so that he lost sleep over it. And I don't know about you, but if I don't get the right amount of sleep, I'm not exactly a ton of fun to be around. And so this is sort of going on over and over again, and eventually it reaches the point where Nebuchadnezzar knows he needs to figure it out. And so he does something that he had likely done many times before. Nebuchadnezzar calls together all kinds of different people to come and help him with this. He contacts mediums, sorcerers, wise men. There's even a magician or two in there, so at least this meeting is entertaining. Do the saw woman in half trick. Anyway, But he's got all these guys in here, these experts, and he tells them, I've been having these dreams. I know that there's something to them. I need you to tell me what these dreams mean. Now, these guys, again, they're part of Nebuchadnezzar's advisory team. Whenever Nebuchadnezzar has to make some sort of a decision, these are the guys that he runs everything through. Chances are he's had dreams in the past that have bothered him, and he's asked these guys to tell him what these dreams are about, and they've done so with no problems whatsoever. So when Nebuchadnezzar comes with the same problem of, I've got a dream, it keeps coming, I feel like there's something to it, great, no problem, we're happy to help. Just tell us what the dream is. And here's where I think Nebuchadnezzar makes things a little needlessly complicated. See, Nebuchadnezzar kind of plays a little game. I can't help but wonder if Nebuchadnezzar is just trying to verify their abilities, or if maybe Nebuchadnezzar is just being a weird jerk. But in verses 5 and 6, Nebuchadnezzar lays out what the terms are for them to help him in this, and these terms are drastic. He says, the king replied to the Chaldeans. Chaldeans just being a Babylonian word for wise men, so if you run across the word Chaldeans, if you want to impress your friends later on this week and say, I'm a Chaldean, they'll have no idea what you're talking about. It'll be great. Anyway, the Chaldeans, my word is final. If you do not tell me the dream and its interpretation, you'll be torn limb from limb. Your houses will be made into a garbage dump. But if you make the dream and its interpretation known to me, you'll receive gifts, a reward, and great honor from me. So make the dream and its interpretation known to me. This is weird. Nebuchadnezzar is the one who's having these dreams in the first place. Nebuchadnezzar is so troubled by these dreams that he calls in his same advisory board. Nebuchadnezzar is so bothered by these dreams that he tells them, you got to tell me what these dreams are about. But Nebuchadnezzar won't tell them what the dream is. Guess what I'm thinking? Nebuchadnezzar is being so strange in all of this. And not only is he not being forthcoming with what the dream is, he tells them, if you can't tell me what the dream is, and if you can't tell me what the interpretation is, I'm going to torture and kill you. And then I'm going to turn your home into a new sanitation site. But if you're able to somehow wildly guess what the dream is and you can tell me what the dream means, well, I'm going to lavish you with all kinds of gifts. You're going to get a high honor from me. It's going to be awesome for you. There is a lot riding on these guys. If they don't get this right, if they don't somehow are able to guess exactly what it is that Nebuchadnezzar's been dreaming, they're going to die. What a fun place to work. And so the guys kind of put their heads together, these wise men, these mediums, these sorcerers. The magician's just off, pressing his cape or something. And they tell Nebuchadnezzar, like, we're happy to tell you what this dream is or what it means. All you got to do is just tell us the dream. And Nebuchadnezzar responds by simply saying, you heard what I said, quit stalling. And so they're kind of in this rock and a hard place. Nebuchadnezzar has the dream. He won't tell them the dream, but he wants to know what the dream's about. So they finally get to the point in verses 10 and 11. The wise men, the Chaldeans, chime up and they say what's on their minds and what frankly would have been on my mind in this situation. It said, the Chaldeans answered the king, no one on earth can make known what the king requests. Consequently, no king, however great or powerful, has ever asked anything like this of any magician, medium, or Chaldean. What the king is asking is so difficult, no one can make it known to him except the gods, whose dwelling is not with mortals. Now, I don't know about you, but this seems like reasonable men responding in a reasonable fashion. But nobody never accused Nebuchadnezzar of being a reasonable man. Nebuchadnezzar's actions throughout, as we're going to see throughout the book of Daniel, but especially here, Nebuchadnezzar's actions don't scream of somebody who's sane and rational at all times. And yet he's the leader of the entire nation. Awesome. So Nebuchadnezzar tells them this is what's going to happen. Nebuchadnezzar gets so angry at these guys, and the fact that they tell him that not only is his request so bizarre, but no other king would ever request this of him, Nebuchadnezzar gets furious with these guys, to the point that he makes the decree of his captain of the guards to kill his entire advisory team and all the wise men in the kingdom. This is a bit of an extreme reaction, don't you think? Wipe them all out. This is going to have huge implications for the rest of the Babylonian government for years to come. If Nebuchadnezzar is taking out everyone on his advisory team, then the next time he has a difficult decision to make, he's not going to have anybody to turn to help him figure out what the right choice is. But it's in this moment, after Nebuchadnezzar decrees that all the wise men are to die, that's when our boy Daniel shows up in the narrative. Now, the text isn't overly clear as to whether or not Daniel was at that meeting in the first place, though the connotation is that Daniel somehow missed this one. We talked about this last week, that when Daniel and his friends were interviewed by Nebuchadnezzar, they were found to be the smartest guys in the entire country. And so even as teenagers, they were brought on to the advisory board of Nebuchadnezzar. That's how smart they were. And so it's a little strange that Daniel and his friends aren't in this meeting in the first place. But Daniel had no idea this was going on until the captain of the guard shows up to kill him. What a fun way to find out you missed a meeting. And so Daniel rightfully asked, what's the situation here? And the guard tells him, well, none of the wise men, sorcerers, mediums, magicians could tell the king what his dream was or what its interpretation was. And I don't know if it's just me, but I just kind of pictured Daniel at that point just going, oh, you got to be kidding me. And he does the most rational thing that anyone has done in this entire story. In verse 16, Daniel went and asked the king to give him some time so that he could give the king the interpretation. This makes sense to me. Daniel is going in front of the king saying, hey, I'm sorry I missed the meeting. I was at the dentist office or something. Could you give me just a little bit of time and I'll give you this answer here? And I got to wonder, as Daniel leaves Nebuchadnezzar's presence in that moment, what's going through his mind? Because he's just committed to telling the king, I'm going to tell you the interpretation of your dream and your dream, even though you're not telling me what that is. So I got to think the phrase, why did I say that? has got to be going through Daniel's mind, right? But Daniel does what he thinks is the right decision to do, something that he's probably done several times, and that's he goes to his friends. He goes to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, again, those being the Hebrew names of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Collectively, these guys, they come to the smartest choice that they can. They pray. As they pray, they ask God to give them not just wisdom, but to also give them mercy in the midst of this, to help them figure out how these things are going on. And over the course of the night, while they're praying, Daniel has a vision. And in this vision, everything is laid out perfectly clear to him. Not just what the dream itself means, but what the dream Nebuchadnezzar has. And it's so crystal clear that the only plausible explanation is that God answered Daniel's request. Once again, Daniel has placed his trust in God, and God has shown himself to be worthy of that trust. Because of this revelation, Daniel does the right thing right off the bat. Before he ever does anything else, Daniel springs into worship, praising God for giving him this vision, for being worthy of that trust. The next day, he prepares to go into the presence of Nebuchadnezzar once more, but this time with some answers. Daniel begins his speech by informing the king of what the wise men have already told him. That no man, wise or otherwise, could possibly have revealed this mystery to him. But then Daniel says it's not him who's going to reveal it. But instead that through these dreams, God himself has been trying to tell Nebuchadnezzar something really important, that God has crystal clearly laid out to Nebuchadnezzar what's going to happen. And so in the midst of all of this, Nebuchadnezzar has seen a vision of what's going to happen. Daniel tells him in his dream that Nebuchadnezzar has seen a large statue. And not just big, we're talking so large that it can be seen all over the place. And you got to think, by just revealing this one little tiny detail, Nebuchadnezzar is now giving Daniel his full attention, because already something has rung true. This strange statue that we read about, this is an unusual thing because its makeup is a little bit different. We read it in verse 32 and 33. It says, the head of the statue was pure gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its stomach and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron. And its feet were partly iron and partly fired clay. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds real tacky. And you're right, it is. But this is an unusual thing to happen. The dream is not over just at the statue itself. As the dream continues on, a stone falls from the sky seemingly out of nowhere, and it hits the statue on the feet. And when it does so, the entire thing falls apart completely. The clay, the iron, the bronze, the silver, the gold all fall away to dust. And as verse 35 puts it, the wind carried them away, and not a trace of them could be found. The stone that struck and destroyed the statue becomes a mountain. And that mountain becomes so large that the entire earth is filled by it. I imagine you could have heard a pin drop in that room. Every person who's in that court is looking at Nebuchadnezzar, trying to find some confirmation if all this was true. Nebuchadnezzar's eyes are locked in on Daniel, because every word he just said is exactly how his dream went. And Daniel, before he continues on, he lets the moment just kind of pause, because he's a bit of a showman. And then he continues on to let Nebuchadnezzar know exactly what this dream is. Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar that God himself is the reason why he's in the position that he's in, that God has given him sovereignty, he's given him power, he's given him strength, and he's given him glory. He said, in the dream that you've had, the statue, the head made of gold, that's representative of you. That Nebuchadnezzar is the gold of the statue, that Babylon itself is the one that rests on there. And then he says, after you've gone away, another kingdom will be raised up. It'll be powerful, but not quite as good as what Babylon was, the nation of silver. Then there will be a third nation, represented by the bronze. Then there will be a fourth, represented by iron, and that iron will go and stomp everything in its sight, will wipe out everything in its path. But then after that will be a fifth kingdom. Kingdom that is divided amongst itself, a combination of the iron. It will have elements of that particular civilization, but it'll also be brittle because of the clay. The stone will come in there. It says, and Daniel reaches the main point of everything that he has to say in verses 44 and 45. He says, in the days of those kings, the God of the heavens will set a kingdom that will never be destroyed. This kingdom will not be left to another people. It will crush all these kingdoms, bringing them to an end, but will itself endure forever. You saw a stone break off from the mountain without a hand touching it. It crushed the iron, bronze, fired clay, silver, and gold. The great God has told the king what will happen in the future. The dream is certain, its interpretation reliable. God will not only wipe out any traces of these five kingdoms, but God himself will establish a kingdom that will reign forever. This is the dream that Nebuchadnezzar has. Now, a lot of people have theorized that much of this prophetic dream, if not all of it, has already taken place. See, we know from history that eventually Babylon fell. Its power and its influence were wiped out completely. Then there are some biblical scholars who have concluded that the silver, the bronze, and the iron may have been Persia, Greece, and Rome. There are some others who speculate that maybe one of them was the Medes, and that maybe the feet of clay and iron were actually Rome itself, because we know that Rome was destroyed from within. But if there's one thing that we can say here, because I can't definitively say, I'm not a prophetic major myself, but if there's one thing I can say, is that history has taught us definitively that each one of these nations have risen to power in some way, shape, or form, only to fall apart completely. Time after time throughout it, we see these nations rise up, becoming global superpowers, becoming the definitive authority in the entire world. And eventually that power falls away. And we see this cycle repeated over and over again throughout history. You can't help but wonder how the people in these kingdoms might have felt. See, for a while, they got to feel like they're on top of the world, right? I mean, if you were a Roman citizen in the time of Rome, things were great for you. You were proud of where you came from. You were proud to be a part of the nation of Rome because you ruled the world. And you place your trust in the power and the authority of the head of that nation. But then imagine that you live long enough to see that power and that influence begin to fade. All of a sudden, that trust that you had in your authority, that trust is proven to be faulty. Because everything has fallen apart. It's chaos. Everything is in political upheaval. People are constantly at odds with each other, only to find out that eventually this once powerful nation has fallen to dust. The turmoil it might create in learning that their trust was placed in the wrong thing and in the wrong kingdom. We have this seemingly inescapable element to our own humanity. This own ability of our own to just kind of place our trust in the wrong things. You and I both have been guilty of placing our trust in the wrong things or the wrong people in our own lives. We hedge our bets on horses with broken legs. And when that trust is inevitably revealed to have been placed in the wrong thing, what does it do? It devastates us. Because that thing was never meant to house our trust in the first place. I want to remind you of something that you already know. The things of this world, no matter how secure they may seem in the moment, all of them will fall to dust. Everything in this earth is temporary. Everything falls apart. Money fades in value. Cars break down. Homes fall to disrepair. People let you down. Nations rise and fall. There's only one thing that is truly worthy of us to place our full trust in. Because throughout all of history, there's only been one thing that has proven itself constant. One thing that has proven itself unchanging. And that's God Himself. Throughout this past year, we have been reminding ourselves of all the ways that God has moved, how God has been there since before the beginning. You can be sure that God is going to be there after the end. He is the only thing that is constant. To be fair, we've got a lot more still to remind ourselves this year. But God is always constant. He is the one constant in a world filled with change. He was there. He'll be there. We cannot allow ourselves to give our complete trust into anything of this world. No one and no thing will ever be as trustworthy to us as God Himself. He established His kingdom that will never end through the cross of Jesus, and we are invited to be a part of that kingdom. The things of this earth are temporary. He is eternal. Where should you place your trust? 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 10 and 11 says, "Therefore, brothers and sisters, make every effort to confirm your calling and election, because if you do these things, you will never stumble. For in this way, entry into the eternal kingdom of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ will be richly provided for you."